you really got very familiar by really looking and bringing awareness. And I think we sabotage that like growth curve and that learning process when we just get stuck in shame. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to Inner Archaeology. I'm Emily.
And I'm Sarah. And we're so excited you're here.
Yeah. We love digging into just, I don't know.
Why we believe what we believe
Yeah.
and how it shapes and forms our life.
Mm-hmm. And you can find out more at innerarchaeology.com.tv. You can watch us because we record videos. And also we have a Patreon where for $5 a month, we've got a bunch of like a ton of episodes on there where it's a little bit more behind the scenes storytelling, stuff like that about our lives. And we're pretty silly. And you can find us there at patreon.com/innerarchaeology. And subscribe to the things. We're supposed to say that too.
Yeah, you know, subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe.
Comment, like. No, but for real, we also love hearing from you guys. Mm-hmm. So when you DM us on Instagram or send us emails at innerarchaeology@gmail.com. That's fun too. But yeah. So last week we were going to talk about something, and then we just started talking about how we've had the craziest fucking years.
So crazy.
And we could not stop.
Yeah.
So last week's episode ended up talking about how like the contrast of our years could not be any more stark. Like it was just like the opposite ends of the spectrum. But what we were originally going to talk about was something that's kind of been on my mind because I'm kind of going through another layer of it. And that's the thing that I've noticed with like mindset work, right? Like you go through a layer of it, it feels good, and you come out the other side a little bit stronger, a little bit more like confident, having a little bit better self-trust, right? And then another layer of the same thing shows up, and you're like,
wait, didn't I deal with this?
Yeah.
I thought I resolved this. Yeah.
I thought this was this was over. I thought I mastered this thing. And I've just realized that that's it. That's just life. That's the path, especially if you're on if you're on like a life where you're growing, especially if you're going to be your own boss, your own a business owner, like that's going to be part of it. And it just keeps happening. And so the thing that has been kind of many things that's been on my mind has been this thing that I notice around my students and how they really, when they come into my program, which is called Write Your Way to Freedom, and it teaches people how to become freelance copywriters, they're okay being called a freelancer, and they're okay, actually that's pretty much it, being called a freelancer and barely even a writer sometimes. I was going to say a writer. But even that one takes time, and it's like a process through that they have to go through to be okay with the other things that are true about what they are, which is they are also a business owner. They are also an entrepreneur, and a copywriter, and then eventually a marketer. And so, and just talking about the process of assigning like new labels to ourselves. Especially through entrepreneurship, because I think some people are excited at the idea of being called an entrepreneur, and a lot of people are straight up terrified at the idea of being called an entrepreneur. So that's what I want to dig into today.
It's like such a dense feeling, and it's one that's so like true, like deep in our like experiences, because we both have like gone through many iterations of like expanding into new spaces, and then like realizing that like you're embodying like a new thing or a bigger thing, and that can feel really like scary, or there can be like aversions. And I think a lot of it has to do with like the associations that you make with these different archetypes, right? So we have like the writer archetype, the CEO archetype, the entrepreneur, the whatever, and we have these like associations, and a lot of times we create these big fantasy scenarios based on small snippets of information that we've gathered from TV or from people in our lives. And we create this like story, you know, and then it can feel really scary when you are all of a sudden you're like in this realm of like people are wanting to identify you like that, but you don't yourself identify with that story you're telling about this archetype. And then you have like this weird identity crisis, when the truth of it is like you're just you. People are assigning you a label, and you get to define what that looks like for you. And maybe like there's like similarities in like, you know, responsibilities, functionality, stuff like that. But like, it's very much this like deep soul, like identity crisis issue. Who am I now that I'm calling myself a writer? Like, who am I now, you know? Or like, who would I be if like I was, you know, this like archetype? And it's really interesting, and people have a lot of resistance because I think that there's also resistance around being stereotyped, or like being like having people tell stories about you based on this label. And the thing is like at the end of the day, we have like zero control over that. But I think that in there lies a lot of the aversion as well.
That's funny. That last one made me laugh, like chuckle, because I was like, well, that's you being an Enneagram 4. Because I don't know that I have that much of a hang up on that one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I was like, but that's like, you know, half of our audience or more his Enneagram 4s, I've realized. And so like not wanting to be like labeled based on anything.
You don't know like, me. You don't know my rich inner life. There's no way you can comprehend.
I'm going into my mind palace.
There's no way you can comprehend the complexities of my, I know, wow.
But really, like, the thing is, it's whatever you've created in your mind as that archetype. That is what is going to make you either want to have that label or not.
Yeah.
And there's so many different flavors and versions of those archetypes. For example, I was doing this onboarding call with a mastermind student, and she was like, I'm so scared to be an entrepreneur. I'm summarizing, right? But so scared to be an entrepreneur because entrepreneur, like badass business owner women get obsessed with their work, and then it destroys their relationship and they end up divorced. And I was like, what?
No wonder like, you would never identify like that. Yeah.
Well, I was like, where did that, like, who is that? Because that feels very specific, right?
Right.
And then there was like literally like a particular person who was like the entrepreneur archetype in her mind, right? And I was just like, there's so many other examples. It's what you're choosing to make this archetype, right? And again, it's like another one of those, like the things we love to talk about. It's the beliefs you have around what a particular archetype is. And your beliefs are going to dictate whether or not you want that label. Yeah. And so and maybe you don't want the label. I mean, at the end of the day, but I do think that there's something that's really empowering about kind of pushing back on the archetypes to make sure that it's like a clear one and leaving space for the nuances of like all the different types that there are. Because at the end of the day, like, especially in today's world, who an entrepreneur is so radically different than who it was like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because it just was not as accessible and it was far too risky. Whereas now it's so much more accessible. It's so much less risky. And I don't know. I just hate to see people holding themselves back through their own creation of these archetypes. That's the thing. Yeah. If it's not holding you back, then like, who cares, right? Like, have your definition of an entrepreneur and like, but if it's holding you back, then that's when I'm like interested, and I'm like, let's redefine. I mean,
I think a lot of times that's like more where the category that it falls into, like, cause like, I don't know, like anytime I have like come up against people, like you see it a lot, even like in the art world too, like people being really resistant to call themselves an artist, a musician, like these types of things because of the story that they create. And really it's like, you know, I'm not a musician because the story that I have in my mind of a musician is somebody who is a full-time professional musician who gets paid and tours and is like excellent, like is an expert at their instrument. And like, that is the only thing that a musician is. And it's kind of like, is it though? Like, you know, and giving yourself permission, because like when you give yourself permission, I think to embody like an idea, it expands you, because like, I really do think you're only going to be able, you're only going to like go so far in your like guitar playing. And then once you start calling yourself a musician, you have this, like, it gives you permission, to expand and like take up more space and to like learn more and grow more. But I know for me, a lot of my hangups around like identifying myself in any which way, it definitely is like that, is because I have such a high standard that I've created the story that I've created in my mind of what these people are. And it's always way farther than I am currently at in my life, but I think that that's a moving goalpost is really what it is. Like, it's just constantly gonna be moving. Yeah.
And that's the thing that's interesting to me is I'm like, some people, I mean, really, I think the best thing to do is to just start calling yourself the thing and then like embodying it. But that can be really like hard for some people. Mm-hmm. And I've experienced times where it was easier than others, but it is a moving goalpost. And it's like, it is an important one because the labels we choose for ourselves do like matter at the end of the day. To some extent, because it's like, it's what you're giving yourself permission to do. In some ways, right? Like if you are a business owner and call yourself a business owner rather than just like some needy freelancer, which is something I talk about with them all the time, it gives you permission to like show up in a call with a client with like more confidence and be like, I'm not here this is not a job interview. I'm not giving you a resume. I'm here to show you how I can help your business. And we are having a business to business relationship. And so like, that's why it's so important for me to like,
it's such a get huge them to energy shift. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it's like, you're making that shift from employee to business owner / entrepreneur. And doing that requires showing up differently. And sometimes you have to like show up differently and then claim the title. And sometimes you claim the title and that helps you show up differently. Yeah. It's just like so funny how it's like, yeah.
And it's like, and I think the thing to like, I don't know, that is like encouraging to share is like kind of looping back to what you touched on in the beginning, is that there's layers of this that both you and I are probably going to continue just going through layers of feeling like, oh my God, I am like, I need to, cause it's so funny. Cause it's like both of us are like already doing the thing. Like we're already doing the thing, but it's like kind of like difficult to embrace like that archetype or really like even admit to ourselves like, oh, this is like what I'm doing and who I am, and all the reframing of like the stories around those things. But it's funny because like the default for me, the default is absolutely in like playing it down and like this like weird like, no, I'm not, I don't know. And it's so funny, you like totally called me out on doing that the other day. Like I just was like automatically doing it.
We were sitting there and we were talking to another like a friend of mine, and she was asking Emily you about your work, and I was like watching you just like downplay the shit out of it. And I was like, hold on. Excuse me. I'm going to step in here because it is so much more than what she's letting on. But I'm like so guilty of this. Even Ben's been like, why do you just like, I don't know, call yourself a writer? You have like a business with like 20 people that work for you. And I'm like, oh, I'm just a little writer. Sits in my little writer desk. And like looks out the window all day. You're like, I do this thing kind of where, I like kind of.
Right. Sort of like help people with mindset stuff. I know, it's wild.
Yeah. And then like, I don't know. It just, it was very cute to watch. I was like, I've done that so many times.
I wonder if part of it is like, this is like a half-formed thought, but I would like wonder if part of it is when you step into like identifying as this archetype, that there's like this new layer almost of like responsibility, like that people may be like looking to you as this like an expert in this area or something like that. Like it can feel like a little scary.
Oh, interesting.
I
think for me, it's much more, for me, it's mostly about appearing arrogant. And wanting to and like how downplaying like, humility is like a core value of mine, and so it's that like for me for sure. And also I think a part of it comes from thinking that most people aren't actually interested. They're just like going through the motions of being like what do you do for work? And so I'm just like,
sure. I feel
I'm
that
a writer.
Yeah.
So it's like usually like one of those two things.
Yeah. I mean, in your defense, like there's so many times where people are just like, what do you do for a living? And they don't give a fuck. Like they're just like making small talk.
Mm-hmm.
And if I perceive that to be what it is, I usually am like, oh, I'm a jeweler. And then it goes nowhere. And I just say that. Like I don't even say like the mindset piece because like they literally don't care. I was just talking to a guy in the airplane. And that's one of those situations where I just was like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, and then I was like asking him about
conversation down.
Yeah. But like, I don't know. I think for me, you know what it is? No, it's really interesting what's coming up for me. Cause like hearing you say like the root of it is like, you do not want to appear as arrogant. And that's where like the hesitation is.
Mm-hmm.
I think mine, and this is so fucked up because it all goes back to the religious trauma, all of it. Goddamn. But it really is. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble. That's, I think, what it is for me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Because also, especially when people start asking you about mindset stuff, they jump right into like, oh, are you a therapist?
Yeah, and there's some
and
of
that's like a common follow-up.
Yeah, there is
that
some
part
of that.
Of it?
And
honestly,
you're like, I've done a lot of work around that because in my life I have like, I've stood at that fork. Actually, many times I've stood at that fork of like, do I go get my license and like doing that whole thing? And I've continually chosen to like work with the people that are falling in these cracks, that it's not traditional therapy. It's not like life coaching. Mm-hmm. It's like it's this like much more nuanced thing. And specifically with like entrepreneurs seems to be how it's unfolding. And so there is some, because I have had some people be like, oh, do you have a license? And then I have to go into, I do have some feelings around like, am I feeling like I have to justify like my validity?
Which is, I jumped in even in that like one conversation because I have so many therapist friends who are letting their license lapse because they can't like have the same impact as a therapist.
Yeah.
So
and which is so,
it's a whole dismantling of like a thought process.
Yeah. And so, but it's funny because it's like not, that has happened. Like I could count on one hand how many times that has happened. That's not like very prevalent, but I think it's like more so, it's much more. I actually don't know. I might have to think about it.
Is it imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome that where you might get in trouble if you're found out?
If I'm like, yeah. And maybe there's like some of it, like cause like the work that I do, it's like, I'm really like holding space for people, like in their vulnerabilities and where and we're like working on like mindset stuff and they're sharing intimate things with me. So there's also like a layer of like wanting I'm so careful, and I'm so aware of like how careful I have to be with people. Like when people are sharing their hearts with me, like I do have a massive responsibility to like be really, really like careful and take care of them, and so I do put this like pressure on myself in this like work that I'm doing. And I think like the worst thing would ever be like somebody who like, I don't know, like I wasn't careful enough or I wasn't sensitive or attuned enough or something like that. And that would be like devastating, in some ways. But no, I think I think it's much more like the I'm going to get in trouble is much more like God is like somehow. I think it's still, I think
it's just like so religious trauma. It's not even what I'm like.
Really, I think it really is. I think that feeling is so deeply rooted that there is an authority figure that is going to punish me that I think I'm just going to be pushing back against that my whole life. Like it's just fucking awful.
Oh my gosh.
Like it really is.
Wow.
So that's
intense.
I know.
Well, you're gonna keep working on that one.
I'm working on it.
That's so intense though. Holy shit. Wow. Okay. That makes sense, kind of. As much as I feel like I can understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's always layers. The thing is it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. Like I've been doing this copywriting entrepreneur thing for like 10 years in 2023. And it's like, I still have my like layers of it.
Yeah. And I think you get good, like you get familiar with it. Cause like you do the like, oh, this is the thing. And maybe it showed up in a different way and now it's like a new manifestation of it. But I think when you like look at the growing pains like that, where you like, you're having a bit of an identity crisis and things are like feeling like intense or a lot, to like lean into, just like making friends with that like whole process and that part of you, you know, because I think it can be really tricky when you start shaming yourself for having those struggles. Like if you have one of those coming up. Yeah.
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 I think I told you about it, where I was having a conversation with like one of Ben's friends, and they were asking me questions about my business, but they were asking them in a way that wasn't like open-ended. It was more like loaded, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so they weren't quite the right questions either. Like it was like they were kind of they were just like off base a little bit. But like from lack of knowledge of like my industry and stuff like that.
Sure.
But the way they did it was like with a little bit of like confidence, which I actually feel like was kind of like, now that I look back on it, like not real confidence,
maybe overcompensating.
But my reaction, yeah, my reaction to the whole thing was to get smaller and play dumb. And I started like answering questions like as if I didn't like know the answer, but really it was because I was like uncomfortable and didn't want to like continue the conversation because it was like so loaded. And I ended up like, yeah, I played dumb. And then I shamed myself because I was like, damn, like why did you play dumb? Like and I told Ben the story like later that night, and he was like, ooh, babe, don't play dumb. That's beneath you. And it like felt really good. I don't know, the way he said it so like matter of fact, like felt really good.
Yeah.
But like it was like one of those situations that like I kind of like I started thinking about like what I wish I had said. You know what I mean?
Right. Totally.
Which I don't know. It was just like such an interesting situation that I haven't come across a situation like that for a while. Because I do feel like pretty confident in my like business, right? And like how like what I'm doing with it, how it runs, who's involved. Like I feel so it was like I hadn't been like shook like that in a little bit, and I was just like, damn, that felt shitty. Yeah. And I don't know, he kind of like workshopped with me. He was like, what do you think you'd say next time, right? And I like said them. I was like, yeah, I don't know why I didn't do that. I just like got real small and like I don't know. It was such a shitty feeling though. It felt so shitty.
It's so interesting. And I think
it happens.
Like, and it does. And I think like just bringing like how you brought like so much awareness into that, and even like the layers of awareness around like the shame around like how you did show up. But like, cause I think like when we can lean into like being like, that's not how I want to show up in the future, right? Yes, that's not in alignment. Yes. And then and just looking at it like, how many times do you think that you need to learn that lesson?
Not that many.
Probably not many. Maybe not even anymore. Yeah. So like the thing is like when you really
in the past, I think that happened to me a lot though. You know what I mean? This is like confidence. I think that comes from like time and like
and I think
success and like growth. You know what I mean? So it's like not anymore, but like
yeah. I guess
early on
like
I couldn't have said that.
The like point I'm trying to like connect with is this idea of like when you do have an experience like that you have a lot of awareness around, even if you've had like moments like that in the past, you might not have had the same level of awareness around like what was happening, but because you really zoomed in, not only just on your own, but we had conversations about it, you unpacked it with Ben, like you really looked into it. Those are when you like really fucking learn. Like that's when those like lessons like are driven home. And that's why I asked you like, how many times do you think you're going to have to learn this now? You're probably not going to have to learn that lesson again, because it like you really got very familiar by really looking and bringing awareness. And I think we sabotage that like growth curve and that learning process when we just get stuck in shame. Like it prevents us from actually like really digesting and like learning the thing and like growing from it, because we're just like being mean to ourselves. But
And that's the tendency, right? Like a younger version of me would have probably just been like, oh, so embarrassed and so full of shame. And a older version of me was like, no, let's learn from that one and let's not let that happen again, because that did not feel good.
Yes. So I think like rooting into like allowing yourself to experience like the growing pains, right? Like when you're, you learned something the hard way, or you showed up in a way that wasn't in alignment or whatever it is, but like holding space for like shame wants to show up, and just being like, I know you want to be here because you're used to being here when stuff like this happens, because you're here out of habit, really. But being able to be like, we're not going to let that prevent us from growing, like all the parts of us, right? I think is such like a powerful thing, because like when you lean into the shame thing, then the next time this lesson comes up, because it will, you have to double down on the shame and double down on the shame, and like you keep doing that until you're like really miserable, and it's hard to climb out of that hole. You can do it for sure, but anyway,
yeah, totally. I think something else I want to like touch on, because this is like something that came up for me kind of like towards the end, and I'm trying to like, as we're talking, think about how I felt at the beginning of the journey. And I remember wanting, so like really longing for identifying with the idea of being a business owner and feeling confident in that. And it actually originated from, well, it wasn't even just being a business owner. It was like wanting to have, I just remember really longing for when somebody asked me what I did for work, being proud, feeling proud of what I, like my answer was. Because for the longest time, it was never anything I was proud of. Actually, even when I first started my first business, which was event planning, I wasn't proud of it, even though I was in some ways, like I am, you know what I mean? But like overall being like, I'm an event planner just like didn't resonate. Like it didn't feel like it was like what I was supposed to be doing to some extent. And so I just remember like that kind of being like a core motivator for me. It's like wanting to feel good when somebody asks what I do, which is funny because even now when people literally said to you 2 days ago, I was like, I don't know what to say when people ask me what I do. It's like gotten real complicated.
You'd be like, I don't know what I do, but I'm proud of it. That's the answer. That's what I really don't know, but I'm.
But yeah, I guess I just wanted to touch on that, because I know that that's a feeling that I think a lot of people resonate with, like just wanting the simple like pleasure of feeling proud of what you do.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I love
in
that.
This world.
Feeling like you're doing something that is like in alignment with you, like, and you're showing up in alignment, like that is like the deepest sense of like satisfaction. And to me, that's what success looks like, a big part of what success looks like, and feeling really satisfied, because it's just like you are in alignment, and you are like showing up and like impacting, the world in the way that like feels really true and good for you. Yeah, that is like absolutely like a driving force for me.
Do you call yourself an entrepreneur?
Yes, I do.
Do you claim that label? Enneagram 4?
I do. I think so. I think I have to, because it's like the only thing that fits. I do call myself an entrepreneur. I think when people ask me what I do for work, well, people ask me what I do and I'm like an asshole, I guess, apparently, because I'm like, what do you mean, like to make money? Because like you want to know how I make money. I sometimes say that like because if
I like that.
Yeah, because like I don't know, because I'm just like, it's so funny because, and this is like probably a whole other conversation, but like, because like if I'm meeting somebody or talking to somebody, I'll ask them like, what do you do that like really like brings you joy or lights you up? Like, what do you do that lights you up? Not like what you make money doing. Like, and I get so much better answers. And I feel like I get to know people so much better because they're like, oh, well, I fucking love mountain biking, or like, I like dancing, or I get to know them, not just like what their work is. Cause so many people do work in a thing like, that isn't in alignment with them. Yeah. And so whenever anybody's like, what do you do? I'm like, do you mean, what do I do to make money? Or like, what do I like to do? And it's funny. And I get different responses.
Stealing that.
Because
I'm
sometimes
totally stealing that.
people don't really give a shit like what I do to make money. And sometimes that's exactly what they want to know, you know? And so I like literally had a conversation like this in the airplane. But so I do that sometimes.
I'm stealing that. Do you mean what do I do to make money, or what do I like to do? I love it.
Yeah.
I love that you so freely will ask somebody like, what do you do that lights you up? This is just like so you. Mm-hmm. I still feel a little weird asking strangers that, you know? Oh, so yeah. I still kind of default to like, so what do you do? And it's not really what I'm interested in. Too. But it's just like, it feels more like socially acceptable or something. But I would love to. That's like a layer of confidence I need to move into. Yeah. Is to be like,
I think it's not
that lights you up.
Honestly, I think it's driven by like just like sheer boredom, I think, in me.
Maybe that's what I need to like,
because it makes like so much of a better conversation. And it's not like, I mean, they'll share if they want to share, if they're like, I don't want to talk, but I'm like, ooh,
it's driven interesting by conversation. Sheer boredom.
I know. Oh, but I do have to say, I do have really interesting conversations with strangers. I would have to say that is like, that's pretty thematic. Like I feel like I go like and especially sometimes with strangers, like I do like being like on airplanes and stuff like that. Cause it's like, this is the only time me and this person like connect. Ugh, and so sometimes good. It's some of like the more interesting conversations. Cause there's like nothing to lose. There's like nothing to lose in this conversation, especially for me. And sometimes they're like the most fun conversations. Like I got to know this like comedian that he's like a comedian on fucking cruise ships. And he like traveled the United States on his motorcycle. And it was very fun. It was very interesting. But because it was what do you do that lights you up? And he's like, I ride my motorcycle. So anyway, yeah.
I'm taking it. I love that. Mm-hmm. And the thing is like, there's no reason to be insecure about asking that question because people always want to answer that question. Everybody wants to talk about what
they're into and what they like doing.
That's what I'm also going to like tap into. People would rather talk about that. Yeah. They don't want to talk to you about their work.
And like what they work. Especially if they're not proud of what
I'm like, how much time do you have?
Right. Totally. But especially like if they're not proud of what they're doing, like, you know, and then there's that whole loop around. But I do think I'm trying to, because you asked me if I say I'm an entrepreneur. I don't know if I say I'm an entrepreneur. I think usually I say I'm a mindset coach and a jeweler. And they're usually like, okay. And they're like, it usually, what?
What the fuck is that? I just am like, I'm a writer. Like, cool.
I'm a writer. I know. And then it goes nowhere. It's so funny.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay.
Well, I hope that people feel, I don't know. I just taking the time to see how you feel about the labels you choose, why you choose them, and how you feel about what you do for work is really important. That's why I wanted to have this conversation. So
yeah.
Anyway,
that was a nice
bow.
That was a nice bow. I like that. And until next time.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Bye.